we would love you to keep your cameras on so that everyone can see each other and meet each other if possible. And then don't forget at the end, we're going to have a survey at the end, and we'd love you to fill it out. It helps us improve the program and continue to get funding to do more programs like this. And so now I'm going to hand it over to Vince. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, Erin, and welcome, everyone. And one more thing to add to Erin's housekeeping, we would advise to keep your screen on speaker view so you can get to see everything that Dana will be showing us. It's my pleasure and honor to introduce Dana Depew. And I know I've said this about other artists before, but Dana is one of my favorite artists and also one of my favorite people. We're here today to hear a bit about his career as an artist, and I would almost say that Dana's career is more like a journey than a career, both literally and figuratively. And I first became aware of Dana when he was operating Asterisk Gallery in Tremont. And Tremont has been one of my favorite places in Cleveland since I moved here like 25 years ago. It's one of those like Joni Mitchell places where if you have a place like that to go, you just have to go there. But to me, Asterisk was really like the heart of Tremont, for several years. And it was a place where Dana exhibited his artwork, but it was also a forum for all of the artists in the region, like artists that you'd often, some well-known artists and also artists that you just don't hear about. So I feel like Asterisk was also a place that made people feel comfortable around art and all kinds of art, including art that really pushed some boundaries. And when it closed, I think it's been gone for about 10 years now. I felt like there was like a empty place in Tremont that has never quite been filled, even though Tremont continues to be a great place and gets better and better all the time. But now, after talking with Dana about Asterisk Farm, which he'll talk more to us about today, I feel like the spirit of Asterisk still lives in our region. So I do want to not go on and on, but I'm anxious to have you have a chance to look at some of Dana's artwork and hear about his thinking. One thing I like about his artwork is it's often made from recycled or found materials. And a lot of his artwork looks just often like a beautiful abstract concoction, but often those concoctions have practical uses as well, which we'll hear about today. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Dana Depew.
Well, thank you, Vince, and I appreciate everybody for joining in today. Just briefly, just to kind of echo what Vince said, throughout a majority of my art career, I've focused on utilizing found objects as part of the foundation and the material for the work that I use. I feel that these materials, there's a process of collecting items and then replacing those in a different manner to create something new. But also being very cognizant of the provenance of these materials, knowing where they came from, I think is really important because they tell a story. I owned a gallery for quite some time, and I was also an artist. So as a gallerist, I thought it was a great importance to kind of have an area or a place where people could congregate, meet, and create a dialogue about art and to view art. And Tremont went through some transitions, and it just really wasn't feasible to continue keeping the gallery open. It was more or less a labor of love. And so for a while, I kind of was just showing my own work throughout Cleveland, and I was involved in some sculpture initiatives, placing public art in Michigan, and I was involved in creating work in different venues. And about 3 years ago, and also just to highlight, I was also involved with, and I am involved with Rooms to Let, which is a project in the Slavic Village neighborhood that takes abandoned homes and it gives an opportunity for artists to take these homes prior to them being demoed and using them in a way to make installations, and the public gets to come in and then like one last time, everybody gets to kind of view the work, and it creates a dialogue as well. This is something that is disrespectful, I've heard, but other people use it as appreciation. And ultimately, the dialogue that's created is important because it shows, that these houses were once full of life, and unfortunately, they are going to be demolished. Hopefully, at some point, they would be renovated or the land would be used in some way to kind of respur growth. So with the void that I had with not having the gallery, and then kind of the working with Rooms to Let on taking these houses and being able to do things. And I tried to really hone in on creating the houses. One instance, I bridged a carriage house and a front house together with storm windows and stained glass. And I had a tea ceremony where I served matcha tea to people that came. The one year I made a wood burning sauna where people could come and enjoy, just kind of in this dilapidated area that was, earmarked for demolition, that it was being able to be used one last time. So that kind of unconsciously got me thinking as to, I was residing in Berea at the time for 10 years in a small house in kind of the suburbs. And I grew up on a farm, and I kind of felt about 3 years ago that I just needed a change in some degree, where I thought that I could kind of just start over. And at the time I was starting to grow dahlias, and I had about 10 or 20 dahlia plants. And I thought that I could maybe branch out, maybe kind of just start anew, get rid of all my things I gave away or sold or liquidated, a lot of my material goods, a lot of my old artwork. And I started looking for some type of a farm or some type of agricultural space out in the country just to get away, and to kind of be able to take that in the kind of same mindset as like with Rooms to Let, of taking something that was dilapidated or abandoned and then reuse that. So I did find the space. This was an abandoned farm. It's 13 acres in Huntington Township, which is on the it's on the Ashland and Lorain County border. It's about an hour from Cleveland. It was abandoned for some time. There was birds and animals living in the house. So I acquired the property, and about 2 years ago, and it's been just a slow process of taking the property and kind of renovating it away in the same guise as the work I'm doing with a lot of wellness, and creating a place where people can kind of come and congregate and utilize the space as a way to kind of grow dahlias, but also to use it as a space where the land, in essence, dictates everything that I'm doing. I've been started to make a lot of furniture. This is a piece from old doors that I created specifically for an art exhibition that I had, knowing that I was going to at some point bring it back to my house and use. So these are platters that are removed once you're done with a course, that you could then in the kitchen bring another course, and that's dropped in there. Made out of old doors that I found out of abandoned houses, like making all the lighting. This was an old spinning wheel from my father's farm when I grew up. And again, the provenance of objects that I utilize is really important. A lot of the neon that I'm utilizing is from thistledown or reclaimed, and I'm trying to kind of curate the house in a way where it's keeping its farmhouse decor, but also it's kind of utilizing a lot of the materials like paintings that I've traded other artists and things of that sort. So what we'll do is I'll walk around kind of basically in the interior of the house, and then we'll make our way outside and then come back in. So this is the lower portion of the house. The house initially was set up as a double and used to house the seasonal and migrant farmers. So at the time, all these rooms were used as individual rooms for farmers that would work in the adjacent farms here. A lot of the rooms that I would paint with found paints and utilize neon implements in each of the different rooms. So as you go upstairs, this in essence is going to be the Airbnb. I want to kind of create a communal space where people could come and, be able to come and kind of enjoy the flowers, the agricultural component, but also be able to kind of use it as kind of a respite or wellness area. It's kind of in its early stages. So this upstairs has been an ongoing process of continuing to kind of work on the area, utilizing found materials to kind of go through and place these items throughout the house. The chandeliers and neon are all found objects, lamp parts that I've kind of used. I want to have everything here, all the fixtures, everything be used in a sense where I'm designing them or making them out of materials. And when we go out to the barn, you'll see a lot of my work is based on collecting a lot of materials and kind of piling them up into wood or lamp parts, and then going through that pile and then creating objects.
I have just a quick question. I was wondering, you build all these things yourself and you're using all different like lighting and things like electricity. How did you teach yourself how to build all that yourself?
Well, a lot of it is just kind of trial and error. Got shocked a few times, but a lot of it is, there's a lot of material out there. There's a lot of YouTube things and tutorials that you could learn. And I've done a lot of odd jobs. I've worked for sign companies. I've worked for my brother that's a plumber. And a lot of the work is through just learning things. I think that as an artist is important, especially with public art. I think there's a great importance with, knowing your materials, the limitation of your materials, but also having some, real knowledge as to how structurally things are installed and things of that sort. I think that's really important. And those are all kind of things that throughout the process I've learned, and I'm applying them now to this space. And I view this house and this property as, almost in like room select, but in a larger scale, where this is something that I've acquired, and it's something that there's not a time frame to it. I can kind of slowly create things, as I'm just kind of working through an experimental process. This room here, so the west face, I'm trying to base everything based on the west. The sunsets here are absolutely beautiful. I have 10 acres and then there's a 100-acre cornfield behind. So everything that I'm doing is kind of based on making sure that everything faces to the west. This initially was 3 rooms. There was a small room here, a hallway, and a small bathroom here. And when I first viewed this place, I thought that it would be really nice to create a room where I would break open this room into one fluid room, place a door here, and then move a window down and have a tub, and then have a sauna. But also the slate was found in the barn. A lot of the barn wood and a lot of the wood that is found on the walls was floorboards of a house in Slavic Village that was torn down. And a lot of the furniture I've been creating out of wood found in the barn. This is my Dr. Teal's cabinet. So I'm really big into Dr. Teal's, as you can see. And just creating a lot of the furniture, the lamps and everything. So really I'm trying to have a heavy hand in curating every aspect of the house. There was a hidden brick chimney there that I exposed, but as well as making sure that at some point of having a door here, that this will be, a deck at some point, and then you could sit and watch the sunset. So a lot of the design implements that I'm trying to incorporate are based on the setting of the sun, similar to what a farmer, they want to utilize as much of the light and space as possible. This room is going to be the kitchen for people that stay here. A lot of the wood was reclaimed cypress, and the wood kind of in the same light as the birdhouses that I do. I was acquiring all this cypress. I was able to pull out this little sink out of a rectory of an old church that was being torn down in Beechwood. So a lot of the objects that are here, I'm slowly trying to implement them in some way into the space. These lights here were for my father's farm on the porch, and that was a piece of barn wood for my father's farm. So these objects, to me are endearing and important, but some other people that would see that would not know. This light came out of an old ice cream shop in a retirement home in Beechwood that was being torn down. And so these memories are important to me too, as I could kind of work with these objects. So this area had a pull-down staircase, and this stairwell was added after the fact. Then upstairs, I want to kind of create this into a meditation room. Right now, it's extremely rough, but this space here, I kind of envision where I'm taking there was a lot of blown-in insulation that I had to pull out. I'm insulating it, but I'm kind of envisioning creating stained glass. There's a lot of cool elements here where I'm going to put a wall of stained glass and kind of use stained glass implements and then backlight them in fluorescent lighting. So this could be a nice meditation space where people could come and just sit and just reflect. It's a little rough right now. It just kind of serves its purpose as kind of storage, but I'm slowly starting to work on this space now. It's real interesting. When I was pulling out a lot of the blown insulation on the ground, I found a lot of letters and literature from the 20s in documentation, like old mortgage receipts and things, which were really exciting to kind of see some of that old documentation that was lost about the property. And I donated some of it to the local historical society, but I also collected a lot of the pieces and I'm turning them into like little collages to kind of use and kind of remember, like this piece here is a piece from the paperwork that I found, and as well as this is a box full of the items, like old love letters, a framed flapper lady. And these are all things that were just kind of cast off and just left aside. And it was kind of cool little thing to kind of see all these objects that have a history here. So I've been creating kind of the little collages and things out of these materials. So this upstairs will be kind of a space where people could come and stay. But also I'm using it currently as a studio until a lot of times I use spaces, as I'm renovating. And once I renovate this as a bedroom, I will have hopefully outside in the barn or something, another studio. But right now it just kind of serves a purpose as a painting studio. I do a lot of paintings on old chenille found fabrics, using house paints that people give me. These are small little old embroidered peacock napkins, and I'll paint over them and I'll go and laboriously hand paint them again into new pieces. These are this cool little rabbit, a little bear thing. So I'll just go in and once these dry, go in and repaint these objects. So, a lot of the work is always, and everything is based on, everything's stretched on old store windows and doors and wood, and these sock paintings that I do are just cut-offs of 2x4s from previous projects. I really try to utilize as much material as possible to kind of reincorporate into a new work. A lot of the work that I do is, in essence, the making of art. I'm really drawn by just that process. To me, it's very serene and keeps me really occupied. So what we'll do is we will go downstairs and then we'll kind of just walk around the farm, and I have to feed the chickens as well. So we'll kind of do both of these things at once.
Dana, there aren't any questions yet, but there's a lot of comments about how you're uncovering treasures and what an amazing time capsule you've uncovered and are giving attention to. People are super into your space.
Well, a lot of that kind of, when I was doing rooms to let, I found one time in the house somebody's passport from Poland in the 50s or 60s. And it's kind of interesting that I like to take things and try to find the story. That's very important. So in essence, this is kind of that again. And, you find these objects and these treasures, and it's just really interesting. This is the neighbor gave me this. So this is the property from the 60s, and this was in the neighbor's house that their parents used to own this house. And when I bought this property, they came and brought this to me. At one point, there was a lake out there, which was absolutely gorgeous. And you could kind of see the ghost letter S, and I always wondered what that was. So it said Gilbert air conditioners or stoves. So a piece that I might do is to just replicate that again. I've researched it. It doesn't, that store doesn't exist anymore, but that's another project I think that would be kind of interesting. I really liked the historical connotation. This room briefly is an old bathroom. Same thing, I ripped open the wall, so this will be a large bathroom like upstairs. And then this was kind of a hidden closet that was behind, and there was a window there. So this faces west, and I'm going to put a window, a little small bay window, and then this is going to be a steam sauna. So again, just kind of pulling out the innards of this house and finding these things that were unknown, and then kind of going with that with my overall design format of the home. Okay, so this is the kitchen. So I've been mostly just dealing, I have 4 beehives and chickens, so I have a lot of eggs, and then I have a lot of honey that I store, and then I trade a lot of beekeepers my honey for their honey. So as an agricultural component, as well as the art component, I have, I grow dahlias. Last year I had 400 plants, and about 38 different varieties. So hopefully next year, this upcoming season, I could hope have a third more than that. And I've been doing a lot of weddings and things of that sort. So that mostly is the major cash crop that I have is the flowers. So obviously right now with it being winter, you don't really get to be able to see, all of that. And then also when people come, people can pick flowers and things of that sort. All right, sorry about that. So this property, I have 13 acres. So as part of how this township is situated, this is a farming community, and they have ordinances in place to really not have any type of development. So I have 13 acres, and I'm in the farm program. So as long as I farm 10 of the acres commercially, I get a really good tax deduction with my property taxes. So that being said, I just rent out 10 of the acres to an adjacent farmer, and they come and they'll do corn or soybeans, and that appeases my obligation for that. So there is an agricultural component going on. Then I have the flowers, the dahlia gardens, and then these are the tables that I would have for when people would come for farm-to-table dinners. This out here is going to be a wood-burning sauna, and then there is a barrel wood-burning tub there. So that was a project I started. I just never got finished. And then I'm just using a lot of components, like found components, to make these structures that are very similar to the structures I was already making. Pops on chairs. A lot of this arbor here was the Tremont gazebo that I was able to get a lot of the wood from. These are going to be dining arbors for when people come to stay. Just using reclaimed stained glass and found lattice and things of that sort. The fencing is all old pallets that I've cut up and kind of used as, to make this is Mr. Peeper's little area, and here my dog. So we can walk around. I can kind of show you. It's quite frigid. So
Dana, there's a question about your dahlias, and what do you do? Do you just replant them every year, or do you
well, dahlias are the most challenging flower to grow. So I do have to dig up all the tubers. So I had to dig up all 400 tubers, and then you have to store them in a dry, cool place. So in my basement, I just have drums of peat moss of the tubers, and I also dig up all the gladiolas as well. I just haven't had issues with them not coming back. So each year I implement another fence. So I'll have this area will all be fences and dahlias all the way down as I kind of envision it. So I kind of want to create and utilize as much of the space as possible for flowers and produce, and then also create, having bird houses, and these bird houses here out of found objects around the trees, utilizing those spaces as well to kind of have really interesting sculpture that works with the property, and they can coexist in a harmonious manner with the existing landscape. A lot of these sheds are just garden sheds that I'm creating out of storm windows and things. Like right now it just houses chicken feed, but in the spring it's going to serve the purpose of, you know, starters for dahlias and things of that sort. This is the shed I found objects. Hungry for some scrap. Hey guys. It's Mildred, Belinda, Maud, Rhoda, Agnes. Agnes is right there. She's a little shy on the shy side. But again, stained glass, found objects, you know, really trying to collect materials and then re-implement them in a functional manner, you know, not necessarily did it have to be artistic in any ways, but, you know, function initially with, you know, the creation of, you know, kind of using whatever I can. Okay, so this piece here is a makeshift sanctuary. I do a lot of these makeshift sanctuary pieces, and I think there's been 4 or 5 of them that I've created. Here is found its permanent home here, and same thing, everything overlooks the west and the sunset. In the summertime, I put a hammock here so you can kind of sit inside, read a book, watch the sunset. You know, occasionally combines are working in the fields and things of that sort. So I think it's interesting to kind of, you know, really kind of accentuate it, you know, an experience with where the work kind of is in a wellness incorporation. So I have here where I have placed all wildflowers, and then I have 4 beehives scattered throughout. So the bees pollinate with the wildflowers as well as the dahlias. I've moved the demo shed that I acquired here, and then that's going to be outlined in cedar, and then that will serve as a cabin with a sliding door, and everything faces west. So even the placement of objects and buildings always serves a purpose, and the property dictates as to where these things are placed. This was one of the original garden sheds that was here. Seen some better days. The roof has been blown off in the windstorm a while ago. Right now, it just serves as just a garden shed for vases and things of that sort. This is a piece that I did for the Cleveland Clinic 2 years ago. I have an intention of installing it in the cornfield. I worked with them about in the sustainability. These are these pipette items that I used, and it was about the Cuyahoga River, and these are all Indian symbols for water. This was placed outside the Tausig Cancer Center, so people could go, and there was a meditation bench inside where people could go and sit. It was very windy there, so it was kind of cool that there was a slight whooshing sound of the wind passing through, which was kind of unintentional, and I thought that that's going to serve a nice purpose here when I reinstall it. And then these are stained glass windows out of a church that they were tearing down in Beechwood. The one side is reflective. So I have an intention of creating a building out of these that is reflective, place it in the cornfield here. So when you happen upon it, it'll just be this mirrored cube, but then when you go inside, it would be all stained glass. And obviously, with my work, I have to covet a lot of junk and draw from it. So some of this is tubs or things that have broke down. In the spring, I'll scrap out the things that don't readily serve a purpose. Like old signage and things. So the barn itself mostly serves a purpose. Right now is just electricity or anything. like people give me an old jacuzzi, so that'll serve as like a fountain or something. I'll just bury that, and then it would serve as some type of water component. These are these. I've done several of these fiberglass tanks. Some are at 78th Street Studios. And I've done interior hanging ones. This was when I just got back from Michigan, and I'm going to repaint it and then probably place this out somewhere as under light out in the field. So this was an old bank barn. It had a lot of, it had probably livestock and animals in it at one time. Right now, it's just houses all my junk. There's a lot of hay and manure, so I dig up the hay and manure from the ground, and I use that to kind of place in the gardens. And so I'm using all the elements that are here. So right now, like I kind of am combining things based on, like furniture that I would renovate. This up in this mezzanine area is all wood, cedar, and things that I would utilize for upcoming projects. Doors and things of that sort. So it's very interesting. I like to see the architecture because this barn was in 1900 as well as the house, and they would just set up a portable sawmill and just cut down whatever timbers there were and utilize that as, they were building the barn. So I'm really intrigued by all the structure and all the history of, objects like this. So this area here is just more or less dry storage, old embarrassing paintings that I don't paint like anymore. It gets stored in just wood. I'm always, those were Oculuses for outdoor pieces. We'll quickly take a little look upstairs, and then we'll work our way back inside. So again, like just to echo, a lot of the work that I do, this does look kind of horrorish, but a lot of the work that I do is I have to really collect materials. This is all wood. There was a bar in Cleveland that the boneyard on the east side that they tore the building down, and I was able to go in and get all the cedar wood from the back bar. So this area here, I'll sit here and denail all of it, and then I'll reuse this for saunas and things of that sort. This area in the summertime, in the fall, and the later spring, I just set up my saws here, and I'll just build bird houses. Those are really cool little old signs, field signs that I found up in the attic that you would have to place out in the field to say what type of spraying you were using. So upstairs mostly is kind of more found objects that I use, a lot of signage materials that I use for my neon signs. Right now, this space here serves as more or less just storage and hay. Occasionally, there's some feral cats that like to reside up here. But for the most part, I kind of envision this at some point. Once I've been using this hay for the chickens and for the gardens. I just push it off the side with a pitchfork. But at some point, I would like this as like kind of a meeting area where I could have film festivals or, big farm table dinners, cut a hole in a huge bay window in the sides, the sunset. But as of right now, just kind of here serves a purpose of like, this is lamp area where I start to covet materials, but I kind of, based on medium, are placing them in areas. So I'm like neon area, wood area. So I've been kind of slowly just organizing, and then that's alphabet soup over there where I make a lot of signs for restaurants and people. And so working with sign companies and acquiring a lot of these materials, I can just go through and when somebody has a certain phrase or something on neon they want, I can just draw from this pile.
Hey, Dana.
Dana, oh, go ahead.
There's a few questions that Thomas said, I'm curious, Dana, you have lived in urban and rural life. Every place has something to offer. Your farm space has space and freedom. What was the trade-off moving to the farm? Is there anything that urban folks underappreciate about our life?
Well, I think a lot of it was, I initially grew up on a farm, but I was younger and I didn't really appreciate it. We would have to do an hour of chores before going to school, and I was very resentful of that. I was just like, God, this sucks. No one else has to do this. But I think as you grow older, your tastes are different. It was very restricting if living in the city, you weren't able to fully be able to, I could really junk it up out here, and it's kind of appreciated that, a lot of the work that I do is collecting materials, and, out here, everybody has junk piles all over the place. So it's kind of like I kind of found my place per se. And, there is a lot of freedom out here where you can do really anything that you want. And I think I really needed the space. And I did look for a while at, I looked at some warehouses in Cleveland, but I just felt that, I'm really into development. A lot of the farms and things I saw were being developed, or like somebody passed away and then the house and the farm were for sale, but the back 5 or 10 acres were being sold off to a development. So, the location that I found a lot in Cleveland now, and out here there's strict regulations in regards to development. They want to keep us a farm, and that's very it was by accident almost that this place was available. I believe that it was going to get torn down. They just wanted to have space for farmland. So, and it's just not going to be built up. And I know that this is always going to be farmland behind me. It's never, ever going to be developed. If you try to sell your property, and if you're in the farming program, you have to pay back the last 3 years of your discount they do not want you to sell your property at all. They want to keep this as farmland. So that's very intriguing to me that, knowing that.
Dana, just a couple more questions. There's a question about any tips for sourcing. You mentioned Thistledown, an ice cream parlor, and a church. How do you find places that might offer interesting elements for your work? And then another part of that question is, before you had 10 acres, how did you source and catalog all your stuff?
Well, I've had at my house, I've always, people know that I collect materials. So when someone's tearing down a house or some elements or things that I want, and I always take that, people already know I'm going to use these materials for some type of upcoming project. So I think that that's important. And it's again, I'm very interested in the provenance of things, that knowing where things come from, and kind of appropriately replacing these items in some capacity where they're going to be used again, and they're not really just something that's just thrown away in a landfill.
Dana, do you have any advice for someone, like probably now in your art practice, people just call you when a building's coming down or some cool signage is
Yes.
coming down? How did you start? Was that just a slow process letting people know, or how did you begin your process of kind of collecting that stuff?
Well, it started off slow. Then people started realizing that a lot of found objects and, things that were going to get thrown out. A lot of people want to see things that are reused, but they just don't have the ability to retain things. And then I work sometimes where I buy things on auctions, and then get like the demo rights to like the back bar where I got all the cedar. I think I paid like $10 for that. So you go in and then you can tear out all the wood, and then that's stuff that I'll be able to utilize.
Then Nicole says, how do you manage not being able to take it all?
Yeah, that's a good question. If I don't know the answer to that, because I do have a hard time saying no, but I am now starting to be a little more selective because I have so much material, and a lot of it is there's an in and an out, an ebb and a flow, where I have to be able to be cognizant. I just can't just take everything, because I have to, the things that I bring in have to be implemented in some way. Everything is going to be used on this property in some capacity. Fencing and wood, and that is going to be for structures and renovating the house. So that's a good question. I am being a little more selective when somebody wants to give me like old doors that are really beat up or something. I would just like give thanks, but I might have to pass this time. But keep me in mind if other things come up. So
sorry to interrupt. Robin asked, how do you get the demo rights also? Like, how do you, once someone calls you, how do you get in there?
There's online auctions that you could kind of, that you can, of a building that's being torn down, or I know developers and builders and things. So when they're tearing a building down, they need to get the material out of there. So, they don't want to have to throw in a landfill, but it's also, they're on a time constraints too. So I've partnered with a lot of them in regards to where they'll give me a location of a building that's being torn down. They allow me to go there and, reclaim whatever I want, utilize it. And they have an appreciation knowing that I'm going to take these things and be able to, it's interesting. They like seeing that these things are being brought back to life and being utilized and for the betterment of, a lot of people in different situations. And I think that that's important. So it's just a matter of doing this for some time and just being able to, create partnerships with other people.
Dana, what question we had was, where did you store all of your stuff when you were living in a more urban situation?
Well, all over the place. My brother had places. I had various studios, and things of that sort. So I'm always, and a lot of the sculpture and things that I do, I've left places. Like at 78th Street, there's various galleries where I've created a piece of artwork for an exhibition, and then I just say they want to continue to use it. So I just say, hey, whenever you wanted me to come and get it, just to let me know. So I kind of just like create these things and leave them. People utilize them, and then when they can't use them anymore, or they move, or the place closes, then they'll contact me about recovering them.
Could you also tell us what the significance of your tattoo on your left hand is?
That's for Bernie Kosar. When I was a child, my childhood hero was Bernie Kosar. So while I was residing with an apprentice tattoo artist, and we would go out late at night, and then we would come back and think of having him practice on us and do various tattoos. So one night I thought it'd be a good idea to have my childhood hero on the top of my hand, which, I got to meet Bernie years later, and he was like, I've heard about you. He knew that there was this weirdo with this tattoo on his hand. So it was just fate till we finally met.
That's great. Another question I had for you, Dana, is are you planning to have any like gallery space or anything at the farm where other artists would exhibit?
Yes, I'm thinking of, these are all ideas that are still coming to light as I start to create. The one component is I'm having these, farm table dinners where I have people come out, and we just, use produce and eggs and things from the house, and then have a dinner of that, and people bring things, and then we just have a dialogue, or just kind of a congregation of people. Then obviously with COVID, that really streamlined that. But at some point, I want this to really be, an area where people could congregate, to kind of get out of the city. It's only an hour away. And I work in the city quite frequently as well. So it's nice to just get away for a little bit, kind of hang out in a place that has this artwork, and the artwork is geared really with wellness and relaxation is the process of the direction of a lot of these installations that I've been doing. So I think that that's important, but there would be a component, I think, with building some sheds and things that could be small residencies or exhibition spaces to some degree. And I think it would be interesting dynamic to see more gallery work possibly placed in a small shed or something and have a gallery feel to it. But I think that's also playing with, placement of work in a different environment. I think that I've been doing that, somewhat unconsciously for a while with a lot of the public work that I've been doing.
I have a question. I feel like the cool thing about this space is it's on your own time and you're kind of like working as you go. How do you balance, your like living and making money from art versus like being able to just take your time, tinker, and do whatever you want?
Yeah, it would be nice to do the latter, but unfortunately, I have tractor payment, mortgage payments, so I take a lot of odd jobs. I've worked in the past recently for sign companies installing signs. I worked for my brother who's a plumber. So I take a lot of odd jobs. And then currently I'm working with other artists as an assistant, assisting them with building artwork, which I like that role because you learn a lot and you're still working and making art. Obviously, it's very seasonal here. I do the honey and the flowers, but that's not really a sustainable income. So obviously, there's other things to do. And I like to do real interesting things. Like there's a Walmart in Oberlin. So I was almost going to I like to play a role sometimes with some of the performance pieces I do where I could, work at a Walmart, or I've done previous performances when space is opened. I made it the gallery area into a small kiosk and served coffee. And then at the Massillon Museum, I set up a table by the caterers and I just served cake with an apron on. And these are kind of little performative things that I've done as well, just as part of, another body of work that I'm doing. So I'm just very interested in almost a hospitality aspect. That's nothing new with art, but I like owning a gallery and having people come, or creating the space where people could come. I view it as almost having a gallery and an extension of that. And hence why I'm going to call this place Ashford Farm, and it's almost echoing the brick and mortar space that I had in Tremont for some time.
Dana, when do you think that you would, it's going to be possible for you to have like the bed and breakfast thing get off the ground at your?
Well, I'm hoping this later spring or summer. There's some plumbing things I have to do, and it's possibly prepared now, but it would be just kind of for friends or people to come out. I kind of viewed it as an Airbnb that I could do, but I think I could just have people come out and experience it. I've already kind of, to some capacity, have had that with some of these smaller dinners that I've had in farm to table dinners on Sundays every other week or so. I just kind of have I set up tables in the middle of the flower gardens and people come out. And I had people the one time bring a small item to talk about. Jeff Chipless brought a brick and somebody brought a poem, and then these things are then traded randomly to other people that are there. So you leave with a memento, and it also creates like a dialogue as well as a dinner. So there is kind of an art component, and it's kind of like the old artists in New York City in the 50s and 60s where they would meet and they would discuss art, but they would also congregate together. And unfortunately with COVID, that's something that's lacking now. And I think once things get back to some normalcy, I think that's going to be really important for people.
Yeah. Another question I had is, because some people might think like, well, Huntington Township, most people probably have never heard of Huntington Township.
I never heard of it before I moved here.
Yeah. So it's almost like you went as far away from Cleveland as you could, but like hearing you talk about, just like your development concerns and sprawl, like I feel like our region is characterized mostly just by like this undifferentiated sprawl. So it's almost like this, not just you, but like the township is kind of taking a stand against that. And so it's kind of interesting that, you're out there when you have all of these interesting ways to thinking about land and things and and what people do with things and how they dispose of them and everything. So I don't know if you could talk about that a little bit, how you see you fit into that.
Well, I grew up in Medina, and I grew up on a farm in Medina. It was I had 8 siblings. My father was a well driller. My mother was an antique collector. So it was really the only farm on that street, but it was still somewhat rural. But seeing Medina now from where I went to school there and grew up, it's unbelievable. And then when I moved, I went to Kent for school, and then I lived in Tremont for 10 years when I owned the gallery, and I kind of saw the transition of Tremont. And I love Tremont, but it went in a real developed direction, as well as a lot of Cleveland now. So when I go up to Cleveland, I'm driving somewhere and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that they're placing development there or something. And it's something where, the adage of like moving to the country, I kind of felt, I don't know if I was trying to escape, this development and all that and being disenfranchised. I love Cleveland, but I just think I was more or less trying to go back to my roots, where growing up on a farm, and I fully didn't appreciate it as a young kid. And then I think as you get older, your tastes are different, and then the things that you're interested in are different. If you just would have said 5 years ago, I'd be growing dahlias and making flower bouquets for weddings and things like that, I would say you're crazy, but I feel comfortable with doing that now. It's somewhat, to me, extremely meditative and all of that. I think that's a really important component that I was not aware of in my life. There's nothing great better than, growing flowers and waking up in the morning and cutting flowers and then taking them to a farmer's market and selling them. And then just the joy that, that gives people, and that's with art making is somewhat the same thing as well. So it was somewhat of a conscious but unconscious decision, I think, if that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, Mallory, you had a question. I saw you had your hand raised. I don't know if Mallory is still with us.
Hi.
There we go.
Yeah, I pressed it by accident, but I'm just so impressed with the farm. It looks amazing, Dana. That's all I would just wanted to make a comment.
Oh, thank you very much, Valerie.
So, are there any other questions for Dana or comments?
There's a lot of comments in the chat that say, can't wait to visit and things like that. So people are very excited about your stuff.
In the summer here, there's a lot of kind of tourism. There's a state park. Findlay State Park is right down the street, and as well as there's a lot of campgrounds. So a lot of people come out here as kind of like a tourism, and there's a lot of farms that sell produce on the side of the road. So I, have offerings of I sell birdhouses, honey, and flower bouquets where people could come, and for $10, I just cut them a flat of flowers, and then people love that. So each day people come out. So there is people come out anyway. So there's always something, a lot of people just come out to the country just to get away and drive around. Where I'm at, there's a lot of Amish buggies that go down the street. So it's just a very, in the wintertime, it's a little more secluded. But in the summertime and then when it's more temperate, there's a lot really going on where people could come out. And I was really trying to gear a lot of the program and things that I'm doing based on having these produce stands, and the flower component is a really important aspect of this space during the spring and summer and late fall.
Yeah. So we have probably time for one more question. Oh, someone is saying, Melinda is saying, Dana, would you please talk about your process of choosing what to work on as you make things within such a sprawling environment with seemingly endless options for creativity?
Yeah, there is no process. It's just, I kind of just work on things arbitrarily. I need to be a little more structured in that capacity. I think I really go out, and that could be problematic where I'm finding where I start projects and then I move on to something else without finishing them. But there's an experimental process too. And I think with a lot of my painting that I was doing, I start a painting, and if it's not going in the right direction, maybe I'll just set it aside for a while until, you garner new information and you have different life situations or things that you could apply that when you come back to that easel or that canvas, you are looking at things in a different light. And some of these larger projects are that way. There is, I have ideas of putting a sauna here, doing this or that, but it's also coveting the materials. And once I feel that I have enough and appropriate materials to finish that installation or that project, I then kind of work on it. So there really isn't a process or a structured schedule, which could be problematic because there are so many things I could do that I could go off at tangents where I need to show some type of restraint and kind of concentrate on one thing after another.
Great. So I think we'll turn it over to Megan now.
All right, thank you all so much for being here. And Dana, thank you so much for letting us into your space and home. It was so cool to see and really inspiring. So thank you. And you all will be getting an email from me with a survey. Your feedback is really critical so that we can continue to provide relevant programming and things that are helpful for all of you, and also to be able to continue to get funding so we can continue programs like this. So thank you all so much. If you have any questions, let me know, but I'll be sending an email soon. And we hope you have a great weekend.
And also just wanted to note that there's some more events coming up. You can look at the calendar on studiotothestreet.com, but next week we have, we're talking with the Case Western Sears Think Box team, as well as 2 artists that have used that as a resource. So a little bit different than a studio visit, but still talking to some artists and more of a resource sharing program on Thursday at 12 p.m. And then there's 2 events in the following week. So just please have a look at the calendar. We'd love for you to join us.
Yes, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Dana.
Well, thank you, Vince. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Dana. You're so cool.
Well, this spring, you guys.